Hey, Aaron.
Hey, Dr. Clarence. Let me start off. Just what has stoked your passion for fatherhood?
Well, being the father of three daughters, well, for me, I was so intimidated by that. And then my first two girls were twins and they were 3 months premature. And so there's kind of a life and death kind of thing. My sister had twin boys I think a year ahead of us or a year and a half ahead, and one of them didn't make it. So that just really kind of shaped everything where I'm totally dependent on God and so it's an awesome thing. And then this responsibility of trying to raise them the best you know how and stuff like that. So that has always kind of stoked my deal. And then my dad, um, I got to lead my dad to Christ when I was 18,
Wow.
but my dad has always been my hero. We weren't poor, we were poor. And so my dad was always working really hard, two or three jobs. And um, so I really admired him. My grandfather, on my dad's side, was a great guy to the grandkids. He was really tough on his kids.
Mm,
And so I saw my dad trying to break that cycle, what I call the chain of pain. And so it's kind of neat when I became a Christian. Gary Chapman, the Five Love Languages guy,
yeah.
introduced me to Christ before he was famous, and
Wow.
that's a whole nother story. We actually wrote a book together about that. And then, so for a while, I had two dads from the time I was 16 to 18, and then my dad passed, and so then Gary became my dad, and so I've been trying to be a dad thing, and so I've always gravitated to older men. So I've had a lot of guys mentor me, like the sad thing now they're passing, but they're like in their 90s and 80s. And just really, the one thing they really did that impacted me would be their love for their wives and their love for their kids
Mm.
and their grandkids. And it was just kind of so by watching them, I tried to learn to do things, even though I certainly parented imperfectly. I just think it makes such a big difference in regards to legacy. So that has all kind of stoked uh, my love for fathering,
Yeah.
So
How old are your kids now?
the twins are 35 and the youngest is 34. They're 19 months apart.
Okay.
So
What's it like parenting adult children?
I don't know. Ask me about 10 years. Um, I think parenting adult kids, you really want them to be on their own, be successful in whatever they want to do, and you want to support them in that. I think when they got to college, we tried to raise them with this concept. I saw an NBA counselor talk to NBA rookies, and he talked about choices, decisions, consequences. So I tried to raise my girls with that in mind and give them as many opportunities to make choices while they were here lived here. And so when they made mistakes, help them to look back and say, okay, I made this choice. I had choice. This is my decision. This is the consequence of it. So when they were in college and I'm nowhere near them, hope they would make those right decisions. So I think now when they got in college and now I try to be more of a friend. And if they want my advice, I share my advice. If they don't ask, I don't give it. And that's kind of it. And I think now just kind of trying to prepare them for life without me. And so that's like, whenever God takes me home, it's this whole idea, hey, you need to be do this and this and this and this. And they're still all single. So we're just kind of walking through all that stuff with them. So it's totally different animal. And so I talked to some other friends, and you thought when they get to college and graduate, you'd be done parenting, but it's a lifelong thing. It takes different forms, but you're still there, and and amazingly, they still want you to be a part of that. So
Mm,
so I'm still learning.
wow.
I'm still in the process.
What it we talk about learning. What have you learned that maybe you know now or have learned by experience now that you wish you knew
Oh
starting,
God.
when the twins were born?
Well, I think there are a lot of things. if I had to do it over again, I probably would have played all their music would have been classical music because it has a connection with math. So it would have helped them, just when they're sleeping. Uh, it's really been interesting you asked me that question. I went to like very conservative Christian schools that I think they had the right idea. They didn't explain why you couldn't do certain things. But as I look back and think about longevities, I think about legacies, I think about generations. A lot of old school things really made a big difference, and and we tried to do a lot of that. But I think being in the world but not of the world is really important. Like your social life, how you relate to other people, what you should do, what you should not do. Um, I think those things are really important. And you probably saying, what are you talking about? Well, for example, grew up in a Baptist church back in the day. There was a big thing about not drinking, not even drinking socially.
Mhm.
Um, Today, even the Christian community, and I'm just kind of sharing. It seems like those who really stayed away from that, their kids and stuff seem to fare better. And it's not you're isolated, but you seem to fare better. And I think that makes a big difference. And so, because when you're drinking socially, you find yourself in places you might normally not normally be, especially after college. You tend to go into bars and different things. And when you do different things, I heard one guy say this: you're advertising, but you can't always control who answers the ad. And so
Mhm.
I thought about that. So I think some things are really old school, but we need to have good explanations and not demand, but give them options. I think we've done more of that. I think for me, I probably, as I listen, probably less TV time. I would have given my kids and probably more books, um, just to stimulate their interest and their creativity, so they're not locked into a box and stuff like that. So they're just little things. I mean, I think we did a lot of good things with them. My One of my twins, Michelle, accepted Christ when she was like 5 years old, and she knew exactly what she wanted to do. I had this book that took about an hour to go through, and most 5 year olds' attention would not go through an hour. And she did it. She came and said, "Dad, I'm ready to be a Christian." And I say, and we had this conversation. I pull the book out, we go through it, and she accepts Christ. And then she influences her sisters to become Christians. And it's so funny because the very next year, in fact, her mom said she's too young to be a Christian. She didn't know. She didn't know what she was doing. I said, well, okay. And so my wife goes in and tries to share the gospel with her. She says, "Mom," when she's 6, she said, "Mom, I did that when I was 5." And she goes like, "Wow." She explains. So I think those are cool things. But at the time when they were little, I was a pastor, and so I would take them with me. I went to go speak and do different things. A lot of times, one-on-one trips. And so just I think with your kids, you want to create memories, good memories,
Mhm.
and with parents, with patients' permissions, like we go to hospitals and they see people in the hospital and we'd have conversation. They traveled with me, one on one. They'd have a weekend. I would speak like to an NFL team for their chapel service, and so they would fly with me, but the weekend would be really theirs, and so they meet the players and stuff. But then we go out to aquariums or whatever, and they go swimming, which meant I had to do their hair, dry their hair, and braid their hair again, which is crazy. So yeah, we had a lot of fun, and even they got to be teenagers, they would say, "Dad," like the one who we did something in New Orleans, and whenever she sees the Superdome, she said, "Dad, remember we were there?" And you just made memories. They never forgot that. So I think we did some things right there, and I think the discipline is really important. And kids who aren't disciplined feel unloved. And so whether they're rich, poor, white, black, Hispanic, kids, it's funny when kids aren't disciplined, they feel like parents don't really care. And so so we disciplined them, but we also asked them. But I learned from a friend. Um, I would always ask him, "How am I doing as dad?" And
Mhm.
sometimes say, "Dad, you're too hard. You're not doing this." And I said, "Well, outside of spanking you, what am I doing wrong?" And they would share with me stuff like that. And so, and I'm not telling anybody to spank their kids. Mine just had my genes, and so one I could talk to, the other two you had to spank. But I wish they say now they're grateful for it. But if it's a timeout, you have to figure out how your child needs to have that discipline, and you have to figure out, because we don't parent perfectly, it's really important to hear their input on how they view your parenting, and have a conversation. It doesn't mean you change everything, but I think having the conversation makes a difference. And for me, I did change, some things I was doing when I got their feedback, and which I hope made me a better dad. So anyway,
Man, I think that's really affirming for me because you're the first. I think you're the first person I've talked to that said that they've asked their kids for feedback just on a little check in. How am I doing as dad? I've done that with my kids a couple times,
mm,
and I think it's good to get that feedback. I mean, there's part of leadership where I just have some foresight that the kids don't have yet, where I know which direction I need to lead them. But I think it's certainly good for the relationship to say, hey, how's it going? Do we need to
yeah,
make any adjustments?
yeah.
Are you getting enough time? For me, it's a lot of, yeah. Are we spending enough time together? Are you
Yeah.
getting enough attention one on one? Um,
Well, that's good. I mean, like I say, I learned it from a friend who learned it from his mentor, because I never thought to do that, to ask him that. But when they did and I heard them, I said, "Wow, this is really important. I need to be asking
yeah.
that question." So, you know, maybe a couple times a year, but until they got to be a certain age, I kept asking, how am I doing? And I would listen and try and get the feedback. What you said is really important. The time is really important. Our spouse and our kids spell love Time.
Mm,
So that's really important. So um, we had we had like a family mission statement, and part of the family mission statement was that I could not answer the phone during dinner. That was just really important. And so, like, I think one time Mike Singletary, the Hall of Famer, called me for something, and we had our worship pastor was with us, and so Mike was on the phone. The guy said, "You gonna get that? You know what it is?" I said, "Yeah, I know it is." He said, "Are you gonna get that?" I said, "I can't answer that phone, man." He said, "Why?" I said, "You see those three girls over there?" He said, "Yeah, they need to know they're more important than Mike." I said, "Mike's got, I think, six kids, at least at the time." And I said, "He gets it. He understands it." And I said, "I'll call him back." And that's just really important. So my girls always, because I travel a lot, my girls always had to have access. I mean, I was teaching a class on marriage at a large church, and one of my girls, she was in college. I think she was in college. Yeah, she called me, and so I took her call, and so then when she finished, she said, "Are you teaching a class or something?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "No." I said, "Just, is this emergency? What's going on?" She said, "Dad, I don't want to bother you." I said, "Well, just tell me what you need." And so we talked, and then hung up, and so one guy said, "Why'd you take their call?" I said, "Well," I said, "it's a biblical priority in Scripture, in 1 Timothy 3, I think verses 4 and 5, and it's God first, my wife second, my girls come next, and then it says the church, because it says if I don't have my family right, then I just qualify myself and try and teach you." And he said, "Wow, really?" I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Because I travel a lot, my girls have to have security and knowing they can always reach me, you know, and that's really important." People said, "No, I never heard that before." I said, "Well, for me, it works. I think it's really important." And so that was, so that's been a kind of big deal. So I'm glad to hear you are evaluating that, how much time that's for my kids. I'm having enough alone time with them. That all that's really, really important.
hey, I want to throw something in the chat and
Okay.
kind of taking a risk here because we'll see how it goes. But give me your first impression. I've been working on. I'm calling the 17 laws of the intentional father.
Wow.
And
Okay.
law number 6 says I call it the law of chores. It says if you want responsible children, give them responsibilities. What
Yeah.
give me initial feedback on that idea.
Oh, that's 100%. If they don't have responsibility when they grow up, they'll be irresponsible, and they won't appreciate it. And I think the other thing with that, you're not just parenting your children, you're parenting your grandchildren,
Mm,
because no matter how intelligent your children are, they're going to parent by what they know, by what they experienced. And so, no, I think that's great. My parents made us do chores around the house. I'm 70, so the dishwasher was a new thing, And so I tried to tell my parents to buy a dishwasher. My dad said, I got two dishwashers. I said, what do you mean? He said, your sister, you see, I don't need to buy a dishwasher. And so, you can argue with my dad. So I had a healthy respect and a healthy fear of my dad. So, but no, I think that's an incredible rule. And I think too few parents do that. And we can unintentionally spoil our kids and they have this entitlement attitude. And so when they get older, they feel no responsibility to do anything and they can become very selfish,
Mm.
so good rule.
Okay. Yeah, I grew up with a dishwasher, but the first house I bought did not have a dishwasher in it. But I actually had a roommate, and he grew up out in the country in South Dakota, and
Wow.
he didn't grow up with a dishwasher. And so, I was trying to talk him into, moving in with me. And I said, just so you know, I don't have the kitchen doesn't have a dishwasher. And he goes, oh, I'm used to that. Yard.
Yeah,
And, so for a couple of years, I had to wash dishes by hand.
yeah.
Man, that generated an appreciation for the dishwasher
Oh yeah,
that I
yeah.
still hold today. I'm like, this is great. Just throw it in the dishwasher.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's great to have chores. I think you build character.
Yeah, yeah, I
you
do
know
too.
yeah. I mean, my dad would actually make me cut grass for senior citizens, and
Mm,
he would not let me accept pay for them. And I hated that, but
yeah.
as I got older, I really appreciated that, and they did too, and they would impart wisdom to me that a lot of times I was too young to appreciate. But that was my dad. I mean, you're gonna do stuff here around the house. You're gonna help people who can't help themselves. So that's really important to me, and I really respect my dad for making me do that. Didn't appreciate it at the time, but
Yeah, well, and I've never met a kid who appreciates chores. I just
mm,
haven't. But I've
yeah,
never met an adult who had to do chores as a child who didn't, in adulthood appreciate their parents
yeah,
having that expectation for them. And, it's like that's this part of the family. Got
yeah.
your thing to do, whether it's the dishes, cleaning up, taking out the trash, mowing the yard. And it's kind of funny how that turns around in adulthood. And I think a lot of parents have this fear of, if I put too many responsibilities on my kid, that they're going to hate me or they won't like
Yeah.
me. And it turns out that actually it leads to a lot of respect
It,
in the long run.
it does. It does. It's so weird. If you read Hebrews, it talks about father providing discipline, and that the father who loves his child will discipline his child. And the discipline doesn't always have to be physical, but you're right. It's something about doing work, which is in the Garden of Eden. Before Adam had a wife, he worked in the garden. Before the fall, he worked, and work is tied to worship. And so it's something about that that's really important that actually connects us to God in a very real sense. So I think you're very right. It is, and it's something about when you discipline your children that's appropriate for them, it makes them love you more. And when you don't discipline your kids, they don't feel loved. I mean, I'm working with kids in inner city Chicago. They would get in trouble, so their parents have to get off work and knowing they won't get a spanking just to make sure their parents loved them. Now, I never had that problem. I got spanked almost every day, but that was just weird to me. But I understood it. So
Yeah. 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 It's amazing how that's somewhat ingrained in us.
it is. It is. Well, I think it's a biblical thing. I think the same way God loves us and may discipline us because He loves us. The same thing our earthly fathers who parent imperfectly, they do too. And it's something how God, I think in God's nature or wiring, that attracts us to the person who cares enough to correct us so we don't go and make bigger mistakes down the road. I think that's and I think somehow we understand that. And I think we know we were wrong when our parents have to correct us. And I don't know. I haven't figured all that out, but I think it's all tied together.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question, because I know you have a lot of experience speaking into marriages. And we have some fathers that tune in who are single, but most of our dads are married. How do you balance being a husband, being a father? Where should priorities lie with that? Who gets what time, who gets first place, who gets second place? What would you say to the dads that are married out there and maybe
Well,
struggle with being pulled 100 different directions?
well, one thing I talk about, I have a book called "Keeping Your Wife Your Best Friend," and one of the things I talk about that I think it's in there. Um, it's the whole concept of balancing. That's the wrong word. Um, because I think the idea is really managing.
Hmm.
It's like we're going to spend more time at work than we are with our families, but hopefully we love our wives and our kids much more than we love work. Even though we might love work, it should still come behind our kids. So think of the idea of managing, and because if you balance, you're trying to give them equal weight, and we don't want to do that. So I think when I look at scriptures, my wife Brenda, she comes first. I love my girls, love them dearly, but Brenda comes first, and then come the girls. Now, when they're babies, just the way babies are, they demand 24 hours a day. That's just how that is, and you have to kind of deal with that. She made adjustments, I had to make adjustments, all that stuff. But as they grow and get bigger, and they need to understand that. My youngest daughter at the time, I think she was 9, and she said, "Dad, who you love most, mom or me and my sisters?" Now she really didn't care about her sisters; she's just being politically correct, and so, and I said, "Your mom." And she said, "Well, Dad, that's not right. You should love us." I said, "Well, that's the way it is. I love her first, but I love you guys very much too." And she said, "Well, Dad, what if we were in a boat, and what if none of us could swim? And Dad, what if the boat capsized? Who'd you save first?" I said, "Your mom." She said, "Well, we would drown." I said, "Yeah, you probably would." And so she's getting ready to leave the room, and I said, "Baby, don't get upset." And she said, "Why?" I said, "Well, with your mom, we could make more of y'all." And so she didn't like that. As I said, "Don't go away, man. Just go away." But it's
Yeah.
kind of a joke, but it's really true. And but what I also found, kids whose parents love each other find security in that.
Yeah.
When mom and dad don't love each other, or mom and dad are going through a rough patch, and the kids see that, the very first thing that hits them is insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why, but the way kids are wired, they think it's their fault. So
Mm-hmm.
when mom and dad divorce, if that happens, they think it's their fault. What do we do or not do? And so that's why parents really need to sit down and talk. And so one of the most important things we tell fathers and mothers, how you treat each other is going to impact your kids. Our kids came home from school in elementary, and we live in a two-story house. We also have a full basement, so it's like 3 floors. And Brenda's on the top floor, I was on the basement, and we were yelling at each other because of the distance. We weren't mad, but our girls came in. They said, "Are you guys, gonna get divorced?" Because so many of their kids in school were getting divorced. I said, "No, no, no. I'm just yelling because she's up there and down here," and just had to explain that. But that insecurity is a real thing for them. So yeah, how we love mom and dad is really important. And so I think the biblical thing is we need to love our spouse, then our kids. Because here's the deal: if we do a good job, our kids are only going to be with us till about 18. Maybe 21 through college, and then they're out on their own. And then you and mom. And so a lot of couples, unfortunately, sometimes end up getting divorced because they've spent all their time on their kids, and they've lost touch with each other. And then when the kids are gone, they're kind of like, "I don't know you anymore." And then unfortunately, sometimes they split. So I would put spouse first and kids next. And
Okay.
that's Shula theology, but so you can
Yeah.
clean that up
Yeah.
later. But
No, um, I think I think sometimes it could be confusing if you don't understand it, especially if you haven't lived through that. If when you're raising kids, it's like you're trying to survive day to day, and you're not
right.
thinking about what happens when they go to college or move out and get their own jobs, and so important. Yeah, the healthy marriage brings security. I think that's a great message to share.
And I think we have to think in terms of legacy in generations. So I think when we do that, um, that helps our kids see that, and that helps them when they raise their kids. And so it becomes a good
Mhm.
legacy down the road.
Yeah, you've mentioned legacy a few times.
Yes, I
Yeah.
have. Well, Aaron, I'm 70, and so I've seen a lot. I've been doing marriage stuff for 40 years, and so you see the good, the bad, and ugly, and you look at legacies and you say, "Wow, that's a really good legacy. I'd love to see." And then you say, "Well, what kind of legacy am I creating?" And one of my mentors, who's since gone to be with the Lord, not only were all his kids Christians, but all of his grandkids were Christians, and then I think all of his great grandkids were Christian. And I said he's got to be doing something right. So when I asked him to mentor me, maybe 25 years ago, that was a big thing because he was helping me. Like he shared one thing with me. He said, I know you're traveling, but you need to make sure you had all your girls' games. All my girls are really good athletes. And I hadn't really thought about that. So after that, I made sure that I tried to get to all their games. No matter where I was, I'm going to be home in time for that game. And so, um, little things like that go a long way. So I think it's good for us as fathers, if possible, maybe your dad, but like if you're not being your dad, your biological dad dies early, get some older men, godly men to help you who seem to be successful with their kids, maybe their kids and their grandkids to mentor you, to help you with, hey, how you do that. And older men love sharing, what they've learned and experienced. So I say, hey, well, don't do this. I messed it with that. And so I think that's really important to have that. So those are my thoughts. So yeah, I think because I am 70, I am thinking legacy. I think most of my years are have passed, and I think they're less, going forward. So I'm trying to maximize that time I have left.
Yeah, I love it. Well, and I was going to ask you about mentorship, but you kind of mentioned it because you had mentioned having a mentor a few times. Um, yeah, I think everything. Well, you said this too, like how we learn to parent if we're just left alone is modeling what our parents did. We kind of look back on that, and the reality is there is no perfect parent. There's always room for us to improve and to change that legacy, that what we're passing down to the next generation. And when you've had mentors, is that something that you had to go and seek out, or did those mentors seek you out? What did that look
Uh,
like?
one of my friends told me I'm a little weird, which is true, but I think because my dad died when I was 18, I've always sought guys out. I a whole nother issue, but I'm kind of guy that goes after what I want or think I want. And so when I see an older man, we were Fellowship of Christian Athletes. It's a new chapter where we were at. I think we just moved there to Springfield, Illinois. And I heard this guy pray a couple of times. He would close in prayer. And I said, man, this guy's pretty cool with his prayer. Yeah, And so I just asked him one day, hey, could we go to lunch? He said, yeah. And so during the lunch, I said, would you mentor me? Would you, could I learn from you? Could I come and ask you questions? He said, man, I'd love to do that. And so for 23 years, this guy mentored me. What I didn't know is his son and I played basketball overseas like some 20 years before then. And so and I found that's his dad. And so we developed this really close relationship with his family, not just me and my wife and my girls all with them. I mean, they've been in weddings and stuff like that. So, but he just poured into me. And there were times I was struggling in my marriage, and he would bust my chops, or I was out of a job trying to get a job, and he would say, hey, he was always making sure I was treating Brenda right. And if I wasn't treating Brenda right, he would sit down with me and he'd bust my chops in love. And sometimes he'd cry with me to help me. Hey, you need to be a better husband in this area. You need to do this and that. And for me, so I just think older men, older Christian godly men who are good husbands, good fathers, have a lot to give us. So I've had sometimes even at the same time I've had 3 to 4 guys mentoring me in different areas. But what they've all done, they've showed me about their marriages, um, and their families and their grandkids. I mean, that they would just, without me asking, we started a conversation. They would just start telling me how they're doing with their wife, how their wife's doing. And so I said, okay, the wife's really important, the kids and stuff. And so they did that. So I would encourage you, if you see an older gentleman, who you think has something on the ball, and you see him or you hear his conversation, They would love to do that, but it's funny. Older men think a lot of them think that younger men don't want to spend time with them. But I've never met a younger man who has not wanted to spend time with an older man. And
Mm.
so when I was on church staff and had a men's ministry, I would actually bring them together, and really good things would happen. So I'd recommend it if people and a lot of guys have great dads, so they don't have to go outside of that. They can just talk to their dads, but unfortunately, a lot of guys don't have dads. And I even had guys who say, I love my dad, but I don't have a spiritual mentor, or my dad's not a Christian, and I love him to death. And we spend a lot of time together, but I don't have a spiritual dad. We'd be my dad. And so I don't know.
Yeah. That's if there's someone listening to this and they're thinking, man, I'd like to learn from Dr. Clarence. Are you still going out and speaking, doing workshops? Uh,
Yeah, I
how
do.
can people get a hold of you, and what are you doing these days with your ministry?
Well, it's you can go to my website, it's clarenceschuler.com, and there's again I told you poor, so there's no C in my last name. It says Shuler. You can go there. You can email me at Clarence, not Clarence, but Clarence, F like Frank, S like Sam at gmail.com if you want to get a hold of me. Um, and I'll respond as soon as I can. It might be a couple days, but this weekend, I think Brenda and I are going to speak at a Weekend to Remember, Family Life Weekend
Okay.
to Remember.
Yeah.
We're actually speaking a couple of those back to back. And just when people invite me to speak, I go out and speak. So it just depends. So we're in the U.S. We do stuff globally as well. So yeah, I love to speak if guys would love, want to talk about that. Sure.
Well, I think the more fathers you can get in front of, let's make a
Yeah.
difference. I think that's going to change the landscape of our nation, of our culture. I think it starts with the dads.
It does. It does. I mean, even if you go back, and so I'm grateful for what you do, but if you go back and think about Larry Bird, you think about Michael Jordan, you think about some of these great basketball players. They had great dads. And so they understood discipline. So what made them really great players, they were willing to listen to authority and great
Mhm.
coaches. So every year, University of North Carolina, Michael Jordan would go to Dean Smith, the late Dean Smith, who was a very strong Christian and built his basketball program on biblical principles. He would say, "What do I need to do to get better?" Dean Smith said, "We need to work on this or this." He would go do it because his dad had a great work ethic, made him do chores they didn't want to do. And so Michael Jordan developed a great work ethic. And so when you look at a lot of great players, um, a lot of them had really great dads and they learned discipline, they learned how to respond to authority. And I think that makes a big difference. So I'm really grateful to you, Aaron, for this podcast and what you do in helping fathers be intentional. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're welcome. It's an honor. It makes me a better father because I'm like, oh, I need to practice what I preach. I do. My kids are
Yes,
going to do
yeah.
some chores today.
Well, and that's it. I mean, because I think all of us I can pontificate and stuff like that, but bottom line, I've got to work at with my daughters.
Hmm.
How can I be a good dad for adult daughters? What does that look like? And each one is different. So what works with one don't necessarily work with the other. So that's really important as well. And
Yeah.
I think another thing too, I think as a dad, we need to be great prayer warriors. I
Mm.
think we need to pray for our kids, every day. When they were little, we pray with them, but I think it's also important to pray for them. So I think it's really important, especially as a dad, if we do that. I think the kids when they're little, they will pray about what's most important to them, and they actually
Mm.
show us and teach us how we can be a better dad. Because if someone's bullying them at school or something else has happened, we hear about it maybe during the prayer time. Um, Another thing we did too at dinner time, we had devotionals. I was kind of inconsistent with it, but the devotionals broke up the day. We read scripture, not a lot, in the age appropriate Bible, but then we talk about what we read. Sometimes we laugh about it. Sometimes it'd be some really profound thoughts. So, and our girls would look forward to that because they would actually go get the Bible when we were going to have dinner
Wow.
and place it on the table. And so after dinner, we'd have 10, sometimes 20 minutes to talk about, we'd read something and then we talk about it.
Man, that's great. Well, I think you're a great example, good inspiration for all the fathers out there, and Thank you so much just for taking some time to talk and share your heart. Very, very kind, very generous of you. Thank you.
Well, Aaron, again, thank you for the invitation and thank you for what you do.